Soul Live love and greetings from my heart to yours. I'm RainMa. This is a SoulJourner's Truth podcast. I come to you humbly, not to tell you what to do on your journey. I am here simply to share some of what I've learned on my own soul journey. I'm returning to my roots as a storyteller. I speak to, for, and from the one that I am. Welcome home. So let's talk about conscious conception and a few things related to ways of coming earthside. Because there's many different ways that people arrive on this earth plane. I think I want to speak a little bit to in vitro adoption, some of the other ways that sometimes people don't consider, but given that in my work, the ones that come into my field, there's all kinds of ways, yeah? First, I will say, and I think I'm being guided to speak to this because it's come into my field a few times. You know, if a person's coming and they're wanting to do a session and check in, they have their intention, and I listen. I do a lot of listening, and I listen to what codes are coming through. I also listen to if there is a star seed that is connected to them, if there is a child that is wanting to come through, I listen. Yeah, so I'm not only listening to the tonal alchemy of the person who's speaking, you know, which is usually the mother. Most cases in the way that I work with ones, it's predominantly women. But I will say that even in that, if a person is coming to me and they're really clear that they're intending to have this child and they've already started this communication and connection with their spirit, the spirit of this child, also with them comes an ancestor and ones that are part of their team. Yeah, so that spirit child, yeah, I call it a spirit being. I never refer to like a spirit baby, because when they come through as spirit, that's exactly who they are. They are infinite source and they're connected to their source. So they are spirit. Yeah. And I probably, again, I think I'm biased, but I'm one that even in general, I'm not huge with baby talk and just different things. It's never been my way, because I always see the sentient and feel the sentient life forms in any and all beings. So that being said, what happens is usually there's a spirit that is connected to the mother. It can be the father as well, but usually since she's the one that I'm speaking to and working with, I read who's coming through her. In the last few years, what has been beautiful too, because a lot of the ones that are coming through come from different star systems. They're vibrating at a different rate. And so for me, and I noticed this really in the last 5 years, and I think it's also part of the learning curve, even for myself and my own activations and upgrades, is that they're coming through also with an ancestor, and the ancestors coming through usually in their line or connected to their soul pod, because ancestor does not necessarily just mean bloodline ancestors. It can also be their ancestral, like their monad, their team. Yeah, there's always a huge amount of beings that accompany each one of us, right? So that's just what it is. But what I'm loving in the last years is that the ancestors, the ones that have actually had earthly lifetimes, they're coming in with the star seeds in ways that they're helping them integrate faster. They're giving them upgrades even when they're in the womb. or part of their training before conception. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating to be a part of and to witness. And I also know for myself as a transmitter and a channel, as things come through, it's been so much easier because a lot of times I had to, and especially if I started working with ones and we were doing, Trinity Roots transformations, and I was walking with them for a specific period of time. Sometimes in order for me to be able to receive the messages from the starseed, if it's not a planet that I'm familiar with, if it's not even their language and their speaking beyond telepathy and some of the other forms in which we communicate, I had to decode in ways. And I love that they're coming through with sometimes their earthly ancestors in ways that they're able to communicate clearer with me. So it's a beautiful trinity that's going on. And it's really fascinating. And I would say that it has gotten much, much easier, especially since my dad crossed and left his body. There's been a lot of activations that have happened for me and with the Voidal mothers in ways that I'm able to receive the information and translate better. Okay. But I will say, because there's ones that have been coming through with their intentions to connect with their star seeds, to connect with their children, they're the ones that are wanting to come through. And the topic of in vitro fertilization, there's also adoption. And if anybody knows my story in the sense of how I even arrived Earth Story and my beginnings of foster care and then adoption and all that goes with that. We come in with our entourage. We come in with, it's so planned. Even when people think that it's random, it's not. It's planned. There is a bigger picture for all of it. And it isn't bypassing, it is just what it is. It's a fact, right? And because I get to work with ones, sometimes on the other side of the veil or in the midst of their process, in the midst of their dance. So even the topic of in vitro, and I'm going to see what's going to come out here, because there's been 3 people that have come in recent time that, they were adamant and almost wanting this magic, I'm connecting. I want to know everything that I need to do to bring this child in, and then I'm going to go for this treatment, and then here's the reality. If it is not in alignment, it's not going to happen. You cannot pray and blow on some special stones, which again, I'm not dismissing, are sentient beings that are taken the form of or transmitted their consciousness in crystals and things like that. I'm not being dismissive at all. I'm just saying that if your reality in real time, as much as your ego and your will is I want to have this baby and this is the spirit that I'm feeling and connecting with and all of that, if your real time reality is the person that you are with, there is behind closed doors that nobody sees, that there is verbal, emotional, and physical abuse or things that are happening that are totally out of alignment. I don't care how much money you have spent on the treatments or hear your will and thinking, oh, maybe the baby will make it better. It's bullshit. It's not going to happen. Or even if you are connecting and you feel this spirit and this energy, if you deal with me and if we're having a session, the things that are going to come through are not necessarily aligned with, they want to come into this scenario, especially if it's not being revealed to me. That's also part of the layers of truth, that there's a total transparency that happens. So that's where, again, I'm not the one. If ones want to be in Delulu land, right, and just kind of gloss over things where there's things that are truly out of alignment, and then you think that this all-knowing spirit being is going to say, yeah, I'm going to choose this route and this is the couple. Because in a lot of situations, sometimes there's things that can, in a sense of relationship, they can facilitate things in the sense of, okay, empowerment or learning to get the relationship on par and in different ways, and they'll come through in at a later time. But if it's literally down to like, okay, well, this is my last treatment and here, and it's all on that, and the relationship itself behind closed doors is out of alignment and toxic, they're not coming in. That's not happening. Or I will say, if the spirit that you're connecting to that's coming through with the information, and if that relationship goes forward, the children that you will have a new starseed, there will be another child that will come in connected to that level of karma. So it's not just so cut and dry, like, okay, this is the spirit I'm connecting with, because I've had ones literally they're connecting with the spirit of this child who has been with them, even sometimes even through previous miscarriages or even abortions or different things. There's certain spirits that will travel with you, and that they're part of you. They're part of your guidance, part of your team. But they're also very clear, depending upon their level of soul growth and evolution and ascension on the other side. They're clear about what they're willing to experience. And so if it's not the time, first of all, if it's not the time, or it's not the right alignment in the sense of even family lines, and that has come through, I would say in the last months, as well, that ones where it's like, this is not the person. There was a woman clearly who, again, I'm bringing it back to in vitro, because again, even if you have, I don't care, $50,000 or whatever it is for the treatments. If there's something out of alignment, and then we're in session and the messages that are coming to me are totally opposite from what you're telling me, I can only go with what's coming through. And then that has to be lived experience. And I can't take people's soul contracts and lessons from them. So that's where what comes through is what comes through. And ones have to walk their path and their dance, and however that looks. There was a woman that I worked with who was so adamant to have a child, with her husband, and this is the reality, and they weren't able to conceive naturally. I think it was their third round of in vitro, and we did a session. And I attuned to her energy, and I said, and she was having some questions about something not related. And then I saw him, and I saw slot machines. I saw slot machines. And then she asked a question. She's like, do I think maybe he's cheating on me? Because there's these periods of time where his phone is off and I don't, and so there was all this, again, the energy is betrayal, right? So there's secrecy, there's betrayal, something's going on. And when I stepped into the field, I'm getting slot machines. I'm like, I'm not getting infidelity. This is gambling. And it turns out that this person had a gambling addiction, which was extreme to the level of, thousands and thousands of dollars. And so the woman who's saying, I want to bring this child in and here, even if you have the money to do it, the foundation is not strong enough. The relationship itself, so it's just not what it is. That's where sometimes even that spirit, that child, I'll get an imprint or an ancestor or whatever, whomever's coming through, connected to the person that I'm working with, only delivers the information that is relevant and that can come through at the time. And sometimes it will be about then things for them to open, to take the rose-colored glasses off their own first eye, to be able to see clearly that it's like, even if you've then spent $150,000 on in vitro and you're adamant about having a child with a person that is not in alignment with you, it's not going to happen. And even if it does, the child that you are summoning, the one from beyond the veil, in the sense of source, the one that you're meant to be with, even if it does happen, it will be a soul and a spirit that has agreed then to be kind of like in a soul triangle or a love triangle with those dynamics. Like that would be their entry. That's the relationship. And then probably likely divorce later on down the line. Again, you can't really, manipulate what is meant to be and the things that are supposed to come to the surface to be seen. And that's also when ones find their way to me, it's just whatever is meant to come through is what comes through. And I'm not responsible for how it lands. And that's where people have to kind of do their own work with regard to those things. Another client who literally, again, I mentioned, because there was a spirit that was coming through, but it was the soul of a child who wanted to be adopted. Yeah. So again, even for me, I am living proof that sometimes the way that children choose to come here is in a non-traditional form. So I'm not even saying anything about in vitro or different things. I'm not even judging any of it as good, bad, right, wrong, nothing to do with that. But there is a higher order to things. Sometimes there's also places. So I have had clients where literally the place where they're choosing to live, the spirit of the child is like, this is not my experience. And yes, they're connecting, and it's true that they're connecting with a certain spirit and child that wants to come in. So this is preconception, but where they're living or certain activations and things that are in alignment or coming up for healing or integration for the parents, there's certain things that have to happen first in order to be in a contract with that spirit being and with that child. And again, this is where I'll say that even children who are already embodied, right? This is the other piece of that it's not only ones who are just going to be conceived and so they're going to come from the womb in that way. There are children that are in foster care or waiting to be adopted that are literally by divine design are meant to be with specific families. And this is why there was a client recently who, because there was dynamics going on in the physical, the relationship that were out of order, out of alignment. And so I don't even know in reality if they will end up being together. And I remember she said, but this is my last chance. This is my last chance. And she was talking about the in vitro though. And I said, it's not your last chance. And the energy that was coming through was bringing through some things that, for her to heal in distortions in the bloodline from her mother's line, right? And when I say it's not the last chance, it's if your mind is limited to like there are only certain ways. So like meaning it's the last chance as far as this in vitro treatment or this doctor or this time period or whatever. If there has been things that have not even been conceived, meaning about like, okay, adoption, two, this isn't even the person that you will be married to or husband, like this relationship will not last. There is another person that's coming forth. And then in the sense that then you won't even be using in vitro, like there's things that also happen spontaneously in the way of what one sometimes even perceive as infertility is literally just not alignment, that there are certain ones that are like, this is not going to happen because we are clear who's coming through in this womb, in this body, in the scenarios and that. And then, people have heard it. You've heard these stories all the time that it's like, oh, we struggled for years. We couldn't conceive and we figured it just wasn't going to happen. And then, different life plays, right? Life moves on, it goes on and happens in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes relationships change and there's another. And then all of a sudden, when the energies are in alignment and say there is a different partner that comes forth, that person who was considered infertile before, which also a lot of times it goes and it's like, okay, it's the feminine, but it's also, there's so much that is being orchestrated beyond the seed. So again, whether you call God, divine source, God, goddess, absolute, there's a much bigger picture. And so from limited perception, if you're coming into it thinking there's only one way or this is my last shot, and then maybe even in dynamics, even if relationships, to the woman that was literally feeling like this was her last chance for this in vitro treatment and blah, 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 she's not even seeing from the perspective that in reality, she's not even going to be in that relationship in the next 3 years. And there's no problem. There's no problem. also this, I have to speak of this too, in the sense of ones who are, have children already, that you can start to, that's also a beautiful part of the work that I get to do, is like sometimes even connecting with spirits who are already embodied, right? And connecting with the soul of that being. And there's souls that are literally in another country, in another place, that are literally connecting already with their adoptive parents. They are already soul linking with them in dream time. And there's so many things that kind of have to happen in so many different people, whether it's, adoption agencies, social work, like there's a whole bunch of people and a lot of steps. But they are already soul linking, and it's beautiful. And this is why, even if ones come to me and you can have, here's your desire, right? And here's this, it's almost like wishful thinking, but wishful thinking also has to be grounded in reality, as in it's a co-creation with spirit. So even the child that's choosing to come in, they are well aware of what they're coming into. And if the dynamic is such, and if they are aligned with you, and they're going to give the information of, and again, like the woman whose husband was, had a gambling addiction, and the play out of that, what she was thinking was an affair, and it was gambling, and there was so many things that once they addressed that issue, it was no longer in alignment. They addressed the issue, and I'm not saying there's not even forgiveness. I'm not saying people have issues and then you don't address them, but in the sense that you'd think then, okay, a child's going to come into that environment, as much as you're doing all of your mantras and, I've got this new meditation that I'm doing, and then you think that you can focus it, but then there's things that are out of alignment on the earth plane. It's not happening. Or, like I said, if it does, there will be a different spirit that will come through, a different soul that will have agreed to that level of karma. They will have agreed to have that as their, like an impulse and imprint. And I will also say, though, that's also not no, I'm going to stop here, because that kind of takes it to a whole nother level of this, about the things that can be cleared from, in our own imprints, whether there was birth trauma or different things from the lines. There's things that can be cleared. So it's not permanent, but I'm just saying there's many, 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 many different ways. I want to speak to the adoption piece too, because this is also something, again, probably because of my life experience and my path as a traveling priestess, traditional midwife, lots of things, right? The people that come into my field are carrying different codes, and there's reasons. Usually there's a connection for me personally with when I'm meant to work with them. Yeah, there's like a liberation. It's not a savior energy in any way, shape, or form. Anyone that I have ever walked with, there was a reason for the connection, which is why not all people will resonate with me. It's just what it is, right? But there was, and I rarely work with people for more than a season at this stage in my practice and in my life now. But last year in 2023, I walked with a woman who was knowing that she was giving her child up for adoption. And if you know me, and I mean, I have my story, and I've done different podcast interviews and different things in ways where my story is out there, so I'm not going to repeat it. But there's a certain amount of sweetness in the ones that I get to assist in the realms of adoption as well, because I don't know, there's just something. There's a connection to it. There's so the woman, let me just tell the story here. Let me kind of focus. The woman that I was walking with throughout her whole pregnancy, and this is, again, I very rarely walk with ones throughout for 9 months. Yeah, I'm in the last years, it's getting quicker and quicker and quicker. And I love it. Yeah. Even like the activations and the way that I'm able to work with ones and the way that we co-create, and our energies vibe in those ways, it's getting quicker. So it's very rare that I work with ones for more than a season. But this woman, I walked with her, for her entire pregnancy. By the time that by the time she found me, right? And this was a woman who And I want to speak to this because also on all the realms in which I work, there are ones who are very religious in their practice as well, in the sense of in their world. And so adoption, and that can happen, right? And you're adopting children from other countries and, whatever, it's a part of your path. Well, this girl that I was working with who was pregnant is from, and I don't know, should I say the even religion? I don't know that it's probably relevant, but I would say it's more of a one of those religions that is very, I want to say the word cult, that's what comes to me. There's a cult aspect to it, right? So I'm not going to say the name because it's not fair, because I also think in so many ways everyone's got their path and it's not about judgment. But this is a girl who at 18 years old is pregnant, is in a religion, an organization, family, small town community, that it is not okay. There is absolute ostracization, shunning, like where you are kicked out, so she's hiding her pregnancy, which again, the way that I work and how I've worked in so many different lands, there's so many different ways that people find their way to me, and it's always been that way, and I love it. Actually, there's mom mystery that kind of works through and has a hand in all of it, and it's beautiful. So me working with her as a spiritual midwife and one to witness her experience, as well as her connecting with a physical midwife that she, again, through so much beauty and orchestration in those ways in another town. So even planning that she's not going to have this baby, she can physically hide the pregnancy because it's easy to do with the kind of clothes that she's required to wear in her, in her tradition and church, blah, blah, blah. But meticulous planning to then birth cities away, like literally, that when she's in labor, all of this orchestrated in so many beautiful ways, which is why I think sometimes I speak of like the Underground Railroad, my Underground Railroad as it pertains to, spirit work, planetary work, midwifery, all of the things. It will always be. Yeah, no one cares about any kind of laws, and with regard to that, the ones that are meant to birth in the ways that they're meant to birth, there are no laws that can restrict that, and there will always be a way, right? So, my role with her, and this again pleased my heart immensely, and I know this from my own birth mother, the transmissions that I received when I was in my mother's womb. Because my biological mother we have similar codes. She is a priestess. We have similar codes, right? She was able to transmit to me things that when I was born, I did not feel this abandonment in ways. I felt so held and nourished and loved. And I have since done regressions in ways of even reconnecting with that space and time. And there's absolute truth to it. But now the environment in which I would have been born, had my mother chosen to keep me, it wasn't even realistic. It wasn't part of my life's path. So this is where even at that, even in the realms of adoption, there's circles and it's like, well, do whatever you can so they can stay with the mother or something. Every case is different. Every scenario is different. And yes, there are ones who, again, if they had the support, the village, the community, if they were being born into a family that were not racist or were not of a certain religion, where they would be totally ostracized and then kind of, born into a heaviness and a life that then they're going to have to do all these things to, remember and activate their gifts and remember, there's a lot of work to it. So with this woman that I got to walk with throughout her pregnancy, as much as from the outside, people would think like, oh, that's so sad. She was basically alone. The spiritual experience and connection and soul linking that she had with her child in her womb throughout her entire pregnancy, even with to the outside, it's like, well, she didn't have support because nobody in her family knew and nobody around, like all of those things. The connection that this woman was having with her child and flooding her, and then between the work that we were doing as well, literally flooding this child with so much love, and also what was happening for her are these activations, because this was also after she, was going to birth the child. She was clear that she was going to escape this religion, or like this was not for her. And that also can be a very scary thing when you have known your whole life and you have been in a religion that if you step outside of their bounds, or even on a level of spirituality, you start seeing spirits, you start activating in certain ways that's considered the work of the devil, or that's considered, communicating with the people who are on the other side of the veil, like all of those things. There's no room for it, but it is in her, right? And then so the activations that she's receiving from this child, it was an absolute blessing to participate, to walk with as a midwife, as a womb shaman. I really prefer a womb shaman because even some of the dance that pertains to legalities and stuff with midwifery has nothing to do with me. And it never has, really. That's never been part of my path. And even the ones that I've worked with and apprenticed with, it's just not, no one's asking for permission about anything. And that's about, like, with fertility, bodies, and in different ways. That's not how that works, right? Permission, obviously, in the sense of what is in the highest alignment, as in from God. That's a whole different thing. But on levels of any kind of outside entity or governing body or governing, government, right? Like here, this is what's allowed, or, midwives are not allowed to legally, whatever. None of that. Anyways, and again, for me, with this particular person, she had a midwife. Again, we have our own underground railroads and connections with independent midwives who do their thing in the ways that they do all over the world. So it's always possible. This is why I think I'm also sharing some of these pieces, and I'm being guided to share more of some of the experiences that I'm well aware of. This has been my life and my path for the past, over 20 years as a priestess. And it's 20 years since my initiation, but just even in general, my nickname of being a womb whisperer came when I was working as a massage therapist, and I was working on pregnant women. I had my, it's been always, right? So anyways, back to the woman. Hopefully you can follow me, because this is just how my flow comes through anyways. The activations and connections between this mother and child, phenomenal. And for me, and if I could see every single woman who is having a child and she knows she's giving it up for adoption, in an ideal world, in my ideal world, that would be the reality. That would be the reality to have them establish such a strong connection. Because a lot of women, what they do is, because it's traumatic, because they have no support, they're shutting down some of those impulses and imprints and the telepathic communication that is coming from their child. And if that is open, you open those channels, you open that signal, you communicate with full awareness that I am not keeping this child. This child does not belong to me. This child is going to be. And then here's another piece of the beauty of this, because she's coming from a very, restrictive religion, and one, that again, she had the choice and was setting up and working with a social worker, which again, this is the stuff that I will say, like in the sense of traditional midwives, there's so many things beyond actual walking, beyond the labor and birth that people are involved with, that a lot of the ones that are kind of in these underground railroads, there's so many things, and connections, right? So this woman also had the opportunity, and I got to be witness to it as well during our walk, to pick the ones that she wanted her child to be adopted by. And she did also name, so she named her child, like this is also something that I have an affinity to because I have many names, but in that connection and that bond, even though you're not keeping your child, it is infinite, and they feel it and they dream of you even when they're sleeping in their adoptive family's home, and they're connected, and it brings forth this sense of security and love and things that don't have to be cleared. And even if there are things, sometimes in the sense of little imprints, that's really easy to do. You can repattern while they're in the womb. And so there's no imprints. That's where, again, sometimes that's where in the bloodline, if there is stuff and reasons why they're giving up the child, that there's, whether it's addiction or mental illness or, what else? Even religious, because if you go back, even on those levels, sometimes the history that is connected to the religion is really dirty. There's a lot of distortion and different things. And so those imprints we get to clear while they're in the womb as well. But this particular woman, even in our dance, I was able to ask certain questions, because again, on paper, right? This is kind of like in general. Sometimes people can have you have a business and here's your website, right? And then you actually meet the person and you see the person who's behind the curtain and you're like, that doesn't match at all. Like their marketing was really good and there's all this, but then you actually meet the spirit and the energy and you're like, whoa, that doesn't match. And so being that she was literally fleeing, well, that sounds dramatic, but in a way, I mean, having your whole pregnancy and it's totally secret and nobody knows. There's things that obviously she's not interested in carrying forth. So then she's not going to bring that same karma or intentionally for the child that she's giving up. So in her choosing, right? Because that's part of it. You get to choose who you want your child to go to, right? You get to pick them. You get to look at the things. And so even though she was aware of what to look for, that she wasn't going to pick parents who were in the same denomination. And she also, by our time together as well, was asking questions that she wouldn't have thought of before. So even if religion, and I don't judge anybody's choice in path, because I do think there's with religions, there's certain aspects that come through in the sense of the power of one. There's different traditions and different faiths in many different places. And so that's all good. And sometimes there are certain starseeds that will come in and they'll say, okay, no, I do want this as a solid part of my foundation, but then they will go into that, and that will be that religion or in general will be a part of their childhood. But then there will be certain seeds of activation and awakening that will happen at a certain ordained time in their life, and then they'll let that go and that won't be part of them, and then they'll go, maybe they'll study a different tradition, or for my ones that are multicultural, or sometimes they call it transracial adoptees, but I don't know. I always just think it's international or multicultural, because I think even the word trans there's different connotations that go with different things. So anyways, sometimes they're meant to have different experiences, and especially in the sense of their indigenous bloodlines. If they're coming into a family that they do not share the same blood, they don't share the same codes or race or ethnicity, they will then, even if they're brought into a family and this is the religion, those are those things, they will bring with them the core imprint of what is taught in pure Christ consciousness, in the pure truth of what that is. But outside of the container of that religion, then they will also sometimes gravitate towards some of their own ancestral lineages and practices and spirituality and things that go way beyond any box of religion, right? So anyways, this woman picked a family that I'm also really excited for this child's life, you know, and just in general, and to be able to walk with ones through different things, through different, you know, journeys. And she did have, you know, a beautiful birth in the hospital, right? Which was always, it was the plan. It was also part of it. But like, you know, cities away, because otherwise in the small town village in general, everyone would know and it wouldn't be a secret. And then our work together just continued in the sense of her having the support to find her footing and to make her exit, you know, because that was, you know, an 18-year-old girl, which still, I mean, you may consider an 18-year-old an adult. And this woman, I will say, on a spiritual level, is so powerful and advanced. And I literally bow to her path and to her walk. And it was a blessing and an honor to walk with her. And the connections of also, and the parents that have this child now, and she's choosing, like this is also, so I want to just give this perspective as well. She's choosing for it to be a closed adoption because she wants for her, like she's confident with the energy that she, in the transmissions, the connection that she has with this child, the spiritual bond and connection that was cultivated and really honed and honored through the time with her, the child being in her womb, her ability to let go then, and then also, and now this is also a girl who's thinking she wants to be a doula and a midwife, and she has her connection to the midwife that worked with her. But again, there's so many things, and this is where like life, if you really look at it in its mystery and how it weaves, there is so much intelligence and a design and the people that are strategically placed. And I speak to this, you know, even for myself, right? For what my life has been, and then one who has literally gone and lived in so many different countries and walked completely blind, you know, completely blind in the sense of, okay, what I need to know, I will always know it, or it will come to my field. It will come into my field as I need it. It's just how it works. And to know that and to walk with ones and be a part of their scenarios without, because there's ones who've been adopted who have sometimes their own wounds and traumas that just bleed all over the place in the ways that then they're like, no, they should do everything to have the child stay with the mother. Well, sometimes that's not the reality. And if the child stays with the mother and does not have the support, or she's, you know, in a relationship that is physically, emotionally, and verbally abusive, it's not an environment that the child would really want to come into. So there's other alternatives. And I think this is why, didn't I start with like the beginning of this was about conscious conception, conscious conception, in vitro, you know, all the different ways in which children can come on this planet, you know, can land on earth. And sometimes it is in different ways. And this is where I will say for the ones that are, adamant that it has to be a certain way, or there's maybe a certain child, right, that you're connecting with. If that child, based on their own ascension, which again, it's not a child, so if that spirit is clear that their path is of a priestess and they are coming in on a certain vibration, they are going to pick someone that is in alignment with that path. It isn't just, okay, I really want this. And so this is where there is a co-creation. This is where I think I like those realms as well, because sometimes in that voidal space and in general, people get to choose. They get to say, okay, I've had ones literally move from Canada to Australia, like literally like these shifts, and then you watch how things play out. But those are things that the child or the spirit being on the other side, or their ancestors, A-team, they're orchestrating it. They're literally saying, okay, yeah, absolutely, you're getting these visions and it's true, but you have to also align with the correct timeline, like where it is not just a vision, it has to be cohesive and coherent in the way that it comes into the physical realm of manifestation. So that's also maybe a little plug on ones who are like over adamant and they're like, I'm doing all my techniques, right? The manifestation and like how and like something. But if you know that there is the power and law of one, and there is a divine order, and an emerald green like layer of just cosmic love that is surrounding everything, you won't get so hung up on details in the ways. You'll step back a little bit and say, how is this meant to move through me? What is the next step? And it brings you back into the present moment, where then you can literally become coherent with the timelines and the energies that are supposed to be brought into manifestation in the physical plane in this embodiment. And that's something that can happen too. Sometimes people can be literally tapping into to lifetimes and to energetic frequencies that their physical body and being is not they're not in calibration. That's the word. Like they're not, it's not in alignment. So you can be dipping and you can get these little pieces from way out something, but this is where the point is, to bring it all into alignment within your being and your power of one within, and then always from that place, from your center, from the power of one, I am presence, and I am one with my mother, father, God, and you bring it all into the one love, one heart space. Then what is meant to happen from that space, including adoption, including conception, including like, am I supposed to move and I'm supposed to live in a different land? The child wants to live here, or all these different things. It happens in such a beautiful flow, ways that you couldn't even possibly conceive of and plan. So when the mind gets involved, I think that's why I started too, because there's been so much, sometimes ones will come in and it's like their mind is so active. They're so adamant about what they want to happen and different things that it's like, okay, but you're not coherent. This is not, you can't manifest from that place. Or if you do, it's going to be really sloppy. Yeah. Or that's where the stepping back, if there's a scenario where the couples are not in alignment, or or you haven't met the person that you will be having that child with, right? That's where the person has to kind of step back, right? And allow, and not micromanage, right? That's also something that is really important. You're not here to micromanage what your ascended self, your higher self knows how to do in complete alignment. But if your mind, there's a saying, is like trying to control the mind is like trying to grab fog, right? You try to imagine that, literally. That's an image. That's a beautiful one. I like that. Trying to control the mind is like trying to grab fog. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. And that's sometimes what happens, in the sense where sometimes when people come in, there's things that have to be cleared first in order to see, okay, what timeline, what and who's coming through. And again, for me, it's beautiful because I never know every single person and any dynamic in different ways. I never know until they show up, and it's powerful. But I will say that there are many more kids coming in through adoption, and who are choosing paths that seem like, off the beaten path. But in my case, again, for ones that have access to my story as a rainbow bridge and what that is, there's so much weaving and there's so much magic that is laced in it. And I am one who, I had my own initiations, and I think that's why the story, as I was sharing about the woman who then got to pick the parents of the child she was giving up for adoption, and also sharing the name, and the energetics. And I will say that she literally, they sink in their dream time, they sink in their dreamscape. So her child is already in with her adoptive parents, but she is completely content. She is completely content and happy with the relationship she has with her biological child. And there is nothing in any way, shape, or form that's like, oh, she shouldn't have given up her child because, blah, blah. Yeah, because this is where sometimes, again, even if I'm in different groups or whatever, I can see what programs people are running. And so there are ones who, again, and I'm not dismissing anybody's experiences, because everyone has to, and I as well have had to go through all different kinds of stages with my own healing and growth and all of that. But there does come a time where there is wholeness. Like you look at the way things have played and transpired in your life, and you're like, oh my God, I couldn't have even written it like that. Like if I was literally trying to micromanage and say, but yet we did maybe from the other side. So that's another story. But that's, I don't know, for me, in the ways that I get to work with ones, depending upon how we're working or how we're called to collaborate, it's amazing and I enjoy it. But it is interesting. This is where I think I started out with conception and infertility and different things. And there's some other things around that I think I'll speak to in another time, another space and time, because in this moment that feels complete. And again, I've been guided to share more of these experiences because there is only one of me. And I know that there's, even at the stage of the game for me in life, I value my time. I only work with 6 clients at a time in the sense of transformations. 6 ones that I'm walking with through for different things. Sometimes it's developing their psychic things or just whatever. It depends on what it is. Different strokes for different folks. And that's the beauty. I love it. I absolutely love it. But there's not enough of me to go around. And this is where my A-team, my entourage is like, okay, I need you to speak, put it out there so more people can benefit. You know the saying? What is the saying? You throw a rock into a crowd. A hit dog will holla. So not meaning a rock, but sometimes certain truths or certain things that you hear, this is how you receive wisdom and truth from any place, source, time, planet, whatever, you have access. And so they're saying to me, put it out there, the ones that are meant to, glean certain things from it or even open their minds to like, okay, well, I never really considered adoption. That was never really part of the plan. Oh, okay. So there you go. I think that's all I got to say about that. Blah, 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 blah.